Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to officially welcome you to workshop E-Mobility and Mass Transit, Global Case Studies, and Indonesian Policy Review. My name is Vania Fitrianti Herlambang, and I will be your moderator for today's event. The government of Indonesia has been promoting a sustainable and clean transport system by issuing the Presidential Decree number 55/2019 on acceleration of battery electric vehicle programs for road transportation in 2019. To support this, the World Bank, with funding from the Mobility and Logistics Trust Fund and the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program, has embarked on a technical assistance on e-mobility adoption roadmap, together with Institute of Transport and Development Policy and also International Council on Clean Transportation for the Indonesian Mass Transit Program in the urban areas of Greater Bandung and Greater Medan. The main objectives of this first 2 days workshop are to disseminate the global case studies on the adoption of e-mobility in mass transit systems and discuss how to bridge the policy gaps identified in Indonesia. Today, we are focusing on the adoption of e-mobility in the US, Latin America, and also Asia. First of all, I would like to announce several ground rules that we have for today's workshop. The first, when entering workshop, please click join audio, and then please mute your microphone and turn off your video when you are not speaking. Please access Zoom from a stable internet network, and while you are speaking, please make sure that there is no background noise. Kindly avoid accessing this workshop nearby other users because it may cause echo or feedback noise. Should you have any question along the way, please write questions directly in the chat box. This event will be fully conducted in English, but we have an interpretation feature from English to Bahasa or vice versa to assist all participants for today. As you can see on your screen, on the bottom right of your screen, there is an interpretation menu, and then you can click there and choose your preferred language, whether it is English or Indonesian. And for those who join us from mobile platform, you can also use this interpretation feature through more menu at the bottom right of your screen, and then choose language interpretation and choose your preferred language. Ladies and gentlemen, please take note that to ensure the smooth running of the workshop, the host and co-hosts reserve the right to force mute the audio of participants who are not speaking that may be unintentionally causing disruption to the workshop. This is just to ensure that the audio of speaker and interpreter remains clear at all times. Thank you very much for your understanding and cooperation in this matter. Before we start, I would like to explain our agenda for today. We'll start our program with welcoming remarks from Bapak Budi Setiadi as Director General of Land Transportation, Ministry of Transportation of Indonesia, and from Almut Weitz, the Practice Manager Transport, East Asia and Pacific, the World Bank. Following that, we will have an opening session from Ibu Faila Sufa as a Southeast Asia Director, Institute of Transportation and Development Policy. After that, we will have a short photo session with all the speakers. And then we will commence our discussion on e-mobility and mass transit system in the US and Latin America in the first session, followed by e-mobility and mass transit systems in Asia in the second session. After each session, our speakers will answer your submitted question about related topics. The event will be closed with conclusions and tomorrow workshop agenda by Nupur Gupta as a Senior Urban Transport Specialist at the World Bank. To start our agenda, I would like to invite Bapak Budi Setiadi as the Director General of Land Transportation, Ministry of Transportation of Indonesia to the stage to give a welcoming remark on Indonesia public transport development. To Bapak Budi, the floor is yours.
Baik, terima kasih. Yang saya hormati para perwakilan dari World Bank yang hadir dalam kesempatan ini, yang saya hormati pula para pejabat dari kementerian dan instansi lainnya, yang saya hormati pula Kepala Dinas Perhubungan dari Provinsi Jawa Barat atau yang mewakili, kemudian Kepala Dinas Perhubungan Provinsi Sumatera Utara atau yang mewakili, kemudian para pembicara atau experts BRT dan juga e-mobility serta para hadirin undangan yang berbahagia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Pertama-tama, marilah kita memanjatkan puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, atas segala limpahan rahmat dan kesehatan yang diberikan kepada kita, dan semoga kita di masa pandemi COVID-19 yang sekarang masih melanda dunia, termasuk juga di Indonesia, kita masih diberikan kesehatan, masih diberikan kekuatan dan semangat untuk tetap menjalankan tugas walaupun penuh dengan risiko yang saat sekarang ini kita rasakan. Saya yakin dan percaya, terutama teman-teman dari Dinas Perhubungan yang hadir dan juga dari Kementerian Perhubungan yang hadir, bahwa saat sekarang ini adalah masa yang sulit. Di satu sisi kita harus menjalankan visi dan misi sebagaimana Undang-Undang 22 tahun 2009 tentang lalu lintas angkutan jalan. Di satu sisi kita harus juga menjalankan beberapa kebijakan dari Pak Presiden kita, Pak Jokowi, maupun Pak Menteri kita, Pak Budi Karya Sumadi. Namun pada sisi yang lain kita juga dihadapkan dengan persoalan keterbatasan yang ada saat sekarang ini. Bapak Ibu sekalian yang saya hormati, kita melihat bahwa saat sekarang ini Indonesia memang sedang gencarnya untuk bagaimana kita akan melakukan perbaikan pada semua aspek transportasi, terutama di perkotaan. Fokus, Bapak. Kita tahu semuanya bahwa kondisi ini saya sampaikan kepada World Bank atas dukungan selama ini yang telah diberikan kepada Indonesia, khususnya perhubungan darat, untuk mengembangkan sistem transportasi umum massal berbasis jalan. Sebuah kehormatan besar bagi kita, bagi Indonesia terutama, atas bantuan yang telah diberikan oleh World Bank melalui pendanaan MOLO atau Mobility and Logistic Trust Fund dan ESMAP, Energy Sector Management Assistance Program. Sehingga kita bisa berkumpul di sini dalam agenda workshop dukungan teknis dalam rangka adopsi kendaraan listrik untuk program transportasi massal di Indonesia. Para peserta sekalian, sebagaimana dikatakan saya tadi, bahwa beberapa kota di Indonesia saat sekarang ini banyak sudah mengalami kemacetan-kemacetan dan juga ketidakefisiensian terhadap transportasi yang ada di perkotaan. Dan ini baru saja saya diskusi dengan beberapa staf saya, bahwa kita harus melakukan langkah-langkah terutama untuk memberikan masukan kepada para gubernur, para bupati dan wali kota, di mana kota-kota yang saat sekarang ini sudah tidak mengalami, yang sudah tidak nyaman dari sisi pergerakan kendaraan dan juga orang, sehingga berakibat kepada lingkungan yang semakin rusak, kemudian ekonomi juga mungkin menyangkut masalah ketidakefisiensian terhadap kondisi yang ada. Kita harapkan mulai ada beberapa kebijakan dari para gubernur atau wali kota dan bupati terhadap bagaimana manajemen lalu lintas itu harus kita lakukan. Dan salah satu yang akan kita dorong adalah menyangkut masalah angkutan yang berbasis massal ini. Dan terutama di tahun 2021 ini, kita akan melakukan uji coba. Pertama kali kita akan melakukan pilot project, penggunaan angkutan umum yang berbasis massal, tapi dengan menggunakan penggerak adalah listrik. Para peserta sekalian, dalam rangka adopsi kendaraan listrik untuk program transportasi massal di Indonesia, dan melihat bagaimana tren ke depan kendaraan berlistrik di dunia yang digunakan sebagai angkutan massal, semoga acara ini dapat menambah pengetahuan dan pemahaman bersama dalam rangka meningkatkan kesiapan kita dalam upaya mengadopsi kendaraan listrik untuk program transportasi massal di Indonesia. Tahun 2021 kita akan menggunakan yang pertama di Kota Surabaya untuk by the service dengan kendaraan listriknya untuk 2 koridor. Satu koridor akan menggunakan 20 bus, jadi minimal di Surabaya akan kita gunakan 40 bus listrik. Kemudian satu koridor berikutnya adalah untuk yang di Kota Bandung, sekitar 20 bus. Hadirin yang saya hormati, bagaimana kita ketahui bahwa kota-kota di Indonesia mengalami tingkat kemacetan yang cukup tinggi, yang berakibat pada berkurangnya kualitas hidup masyarakat karena hilangnya waktu, kerugian ekonomi karena pemborosan BBM, dan pencemaran lingkungan. Tadi saya sudah menyinggung di depan menyangkut masalah hal ini. Dan terutama yang tidak kita sadari adalah menyangkut masalah pencemaran lingkungan yang demikian besar. Ada kajian yang pernah saya baca di Kota Jakarta, pada saat siang hari, pencemaran lingkungan 75% yang ada di Kota Jakarta diakibatkan karena gas buang dari kendaraan bermotor yang digunakan oleh masyarakat kita. Kalau hal ini tidak kita lakukan treatment, kalau hal ini tidak kita lakukan perubahan, saya yakin dan percaya mungkin ke depan kualitas hidup masyarakat kita mungkin akan semakin berkurang karena memang kita semakin lama dengan kondisi pencemaran lingkungan yang cukup tinggi berpengaruh kepada kesehatan kita. Penggunaan bus listrik dan kendaraan listrik lainnya sebagai alat transportasi umum dapat memberikan manfaat yang besar dalam mengatasi permasalahan polusi udara dan menekan perubahan iklim. Jadi sudah saatnya sekarang ini di beberapa negara juga sudah mulai penggunaan kendaraan listrik ini, dan kita harapkan dengan adanya beberapa aturan yang nanti akan kami sampaikan di Indonesia, kita mulai memikirkan dan mulai mengembangkan dan mensosialisasikan juga kepada masyarakat terkait masalah penggunaan kendaraan listrik ini. Selaras dengan hal tersebut, pemerintah telah mengeluarkan beberapa peraturan terkait hal tersebut. Jadi pemerintah Indonesia telah mengeluarkan beberapa peraturan menyangkut masalah kendaraan listrik ini, baik untuk mendorong pabrikannya atau manufacturing-nya, juga terkait masalah peraturan untuk mendorong penggunaannya. Yang pertama adalah Perpres nomor 55 tahun 2019 tentang percepatan program kendaraan bermotor listrik berbasis baterai untuk transportasi jalan. Yang kedua adalah Peraturan Menteri Perhubungan nomor PM 86 tahun 2020 tentang perubahan atas PM Perhubungan nomor 44 tahun 2020 tentang pengujian tipe fisik kendaraan bermotor dengan penggerak menggunakan motor listrik. Kemudian Peraturan Menteri Perhubungan nomor 87 tahun 2020 tentang pengujian tipe fisik kendaraan bermotor listrik berbasis baterai, dan juga Peraturan Menteri Perhubungan nomor 45 tahun 2020 tentang kendaraan tertentu dengan menggunakan penggerak motor listrik atau personal mobile devices. Dan selain beberapa peraturan yang kami sampaikan ini, beberapa kementerian yang ada di Indonesia, terutama Kementerian Keuangan, Kementerian Perindustrian, dan juga kementerian yang lain, termasuk pemerintah daerah, juga sejalan dengan semangat Perpres nomor 55 tadi, telah mengelaborasi dalam beberapa peraturan menteri, termasuk peraturan daerah, untuk mendorong terhadap produksi kendaraan listrik dan juga termasuk penggunaannya. Para peserta sekalian yang saya hormati, pemerintah Indonesia sangat serius untuk menjadikan e-mobility sebagai bagian dari program transportasi massal yang sedang kami kerjakan di Medan dan juga Bandung dan akan didanai oleh World Bank. Harapan saya, implementasi pembangunan BRT di kedua kota ini dapat dipersiapkan dengan matang, baik infrastruktur BRT-nya maupun infrastruktur pendukung untuk bus listriknya. Saya harapkan BRT di Kota Bandung dan Medan nantinya dapat sepenuhnya berjalan menggunakan bus listrik. Pada tahun 2021 kami juga akan melakukan uji coba penerapan bus listrik pada program transportasi umum dengan skema by the service di Kota Bandung dan juga di Kota Surabaya. Harapannya langkah awal ini dapat menjadi tonggak sejarah implementasi e-mobility di Indonesia. Untuk itu diharapkan hasil dari workshop yang diselenggarakan oleh World Bank dapat menjadi bahan yang komprehensif untuk persiapan negara Republik Indonesia untuk bisa masuk ke era baru transportasi umum dan kota lebih baik serta bersih untuk masa depan bangsa Indonesia ini. Hadirin sekalian yang saya hormati, sebelum mengakhiri apa yang kami sampaikan tadi, sekali lagi kami ingin mengucapkan terima kasih dan penghargaan dari World Bank yang telah berpartisipasi dan juga sangat concern terhadap pengembangan terutama untuk angkutan massal di Indonesia dan juga kemudian untuk penggunaan transportasi dengan menggunakan basis yang listrik ini. Dan saya kira ini akan menjadi satu sejarah besar bagi Indonesia dan sekaligus adalah menyadarkan kepada kita semuanya masyarakat Indonesia yang saat sekarang ini populasi kendaraan bermotor, baik itu sepeda motor, baik itu mobil, sejalan dengan peningkatan ekonomi yang dirasakan di Indonesia, saat ini semakin lama semakin banyak digunakan oleh masyarakat kita. Namun kesadaran masyarakat bahwa penggunaan kendaraan bermotor yang cukup banyak kemudian akan mengurangi terhadap efisiensi, baik kemudian iklim yang semakin tidak kondusif atau cuaca yang tidak semakin baik, kemudian berikutnya juga aspek ekonomi juga semakin pemborosan, itu semakin kurang dirasakan oleh masyarakat kita. Nah, untuk itulah kita harapkan bahwa jangka panjang, bahwa apa yang sedang kita lakukan ini adalah memberikan edukasi dan menyadarkan kepada kita semuanya bahwa transportasi yang ke depan akan semakin baik adalah transportasi massal dan juga transportasi yang berbasis listrik. Demikian hal yang dapat kami sampaikan pada kesempatan yang baik ini. Akhir kata saya mengucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh pihak, terutama World Bank dan rekan-rekan lainnya yang akan menyampaikan pengalaman dan opini terkait e-mobility ini. Semoga apa yang kita lakukan dapat memberikan manfaat kepada negara yang kita cintai ini. Semoga Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala senantiasa melimpahkan bimbingan serta petunjuknya kepada kita semuanya. Sekian dan terima kasih. Selamat pagi, salam sehat untuk kita semuanya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om.
And next, we have Almut Weitz, the Practice Manager Transport, East Asia Pacific at the World Bank, to deliver a remark on e-mobility. Please welcome Mrs. Almut Weitz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and selamat pagi, bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu. I'm delighted to open this workshop on behalf of the World Bank, and I think Pak Budi has already done this very eloquently on behalf of the Indonesian government. So I'm happy to follow him and look forward to working together with the government of Indonesia and especially with the Ministry of Transport on this workshop and the future of in e-mobility in Indonesia. Now, as you probably know, the World Bank has embarked on a new program with the government. It's called Indonesia Mass Transit Support Program. And in that, we are focusing jointly on institutional and capacity development, as well as implementing the first few mass transit projects, land-based ones. So for example, the BRT projects that Pak Budi just mentioned in Greater Bandung and Greater Medan. And as part of this, and the sort of broader interest that Pak Budi also alluded to in terms of cleaner and greener outcomes, we have now embarked on this study on to evaluate the potential of electric mobility in mass transit systems for Indonesia. We know, and Pak Budi also mentioned that Indonesia is very, very rapidly urbanizing and motorizing. And with that, and we have seen this over the many years, I myself lived in Indonesia for 8 years, a increasing congestion, deterioration of the air quality, emissions are very high, and all of this is really adversely affecting economic growth and health indicators. We see similar concern, obviously similar concerns not only in Indonesia, but across the globe. So e-mobility has become a very important topic. And we feel that a study on this for the Indonesian context is extremely timely, and we hope of good value for the government. The study's objective is really to help develop a roadmap for e-mobility in mass transit systems in Indonesia, and working this through the systems of that are being set up in Bandung and Medan on the BRTs. We'll study it through 3 different lenses. We'll be looking at policy, technology, but also finance. And as part of this study, as Pak Budi explained, we have a series of workshops planned. So this is the first one, today workshop. And we will kickstart it today looking at global experiences from elsewhere. We're going to look at Latin America. We're looking in other places in Asia. We're looking at the US and Europe to see what of this is applicable in Indonesia. We also really want to do a whole lot of consultations. So this is, again, part of this workshop. I saw earlier, I think we had about 100 plus participants already. This is great from everywhere within Indonesia to broaden the understanding, but also really to get your feedback of what you see is feasibly implementable in the Indonesian context. I think that's very important. And today we're going to hear of some of the challenges and lessons elsewhere. And tomorrow we'll also drill down deeper into the policy and regulatory frameworks that other cities and other countries have adopted to contribute to the successful uptake of e-mobility. We do hope you find this useful. And I would also like to express again my sincere thanks to the MOLO Trust Fund and the ESMA Trust Fund for helping us fund this activity. For the implementation of this technical study, we've actually hired a consortium of consultants led by the Institute of Transportation and Development Policy and supported by the International Council on Clean Transportation. And I know that right after me, Falia Supa, the ITDP Southeast Asia Director, will provide more details on the scope of the activities and status of it. But let me just conclude with a strong support, expression of strong support from our end. Globally, really, we are looking into e-mobility across the board in all the regions now. It's becoming a more and more important topic. The World Bank is following a framework of avoid, shift, and improve, meaning, in essence, it means avoid trips that you don't really need to take, shift to cleaner modes, and improve the existing modes of transport and vehicles. So these are all sort of in the context of helping to decarbonize transport, and for us in transport to contribute to a greener and healthier future, given that that is not something that we currently can say we leave to our children if the current path of development and economic growth is to continue without a marked shift. So I'm excited about doing this work in Indonesia. I really, really would like to thank the government for their strong support to look into this and to work very closely with the study team and to challenge us as well. If we're coming up with ideas that just can't work in the Indonesian context, it's important to hear those. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Faila Sufa now to give us a bit more detail. And I look forward to the case studies that we're going to be hearing today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
First of all, I would like to extend a special welcome to our guest of honor, of course, Bapak Budi Setiadi, Director General of Land Transport, Ministry of Transportation, Republic Indonesia. And also thank you, Almun Wets, Practice Manager, East Asia and Pacific Region, the World Bank. And we also have Nupur Gupta, Senior Urban Transport Specialist from the World Bank, and all representatives from West Java Province and North Sumatra Province. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all of the speakers and participants. And thank you for joining our e-mobility workshop today. So I am Faila Sufa, the Southeast Asia Director of ITDP. And on behalf of the consultant team for e-mobility adoption roadmap for the Indonesia Mass Transit Program from the World Bank, I would like to welcome all of you to e-mobility and mass transit global case studies and Indonesian policy review workshop. To provide assistance to implement this e-mobility study, the World Bank has hired a consortium, as mentioned by Almun earlier, led by us, ITDP, and supported by ICCT. So the main objective of this technical assistance is to provide to provide the technical assistance and advice to the government of Indonesia toward exploring the potential of e-mobility technologies and their possible adoption in the mass transit system in Greater Medan and Greater Bandung, which will be supported by the proposed World Bank funded Indonesia Mass Transit Program Support Project, or IMT PSP. And then there are three main area components that are included in this study. First is reviewing the e-mobility global trends and market and policy assessment of e-mobility in Indonesia. And in this output, we review global case studies for e-mobility adoption and also conducted regular assessment of e-mobility in Indonesia. And we have recommended several policy gaps that need to be addressed by the government of Indonesia to accelerate the electric vehicle adoption, such as a strong direct and indirect incentive for EV consumers, and then charging infrastructure development, mandates for public fleet vehicles, and innovative business model to support e-mobility adoption for mass transit system in Indonesia. And then for the second output from this technical assistance, we will provide technical advice and practical recommendation to the government of Indonesia for developing a roadmap to adopt e-mobility in Greater Medan and also Bandung. And then we will analyze the technical aspect for e-mobility system, for instance, for electric buses, charging strategies, grid analysis requirement, and also the implementation phases. And then we will also provide recommendation for the business model that is suitable for e-mobility adoptions in Greater Medan and Greater Bandung. Last, the study will also focus on capacity building and knowledge exchange to raise awareness of the benefit of adopting e-mobility in mass transit system. We will conduct a series of workshops. Today's workshop will be focused on e-mobility and mass transit system, global trend and case studies, with the main objective is to disseminate global and market trends in e-mobility and in adoption of e-mobility in mass transit system in California, Santiago, Bogota, Shenzhen, and also Kolkata. Before coming to a close of this remark, I would also like to encourage all participants later to active participate to today's workshop. So you can post your questions to the speaker on the chat box, and we will follow by the discussion later. And then I sincerely hope that you will enjoy today's workshops, and thank you all for your participation. Thank you. Over to you, Fania.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored and also excited to introduce to you all the distinguished speakers who are already joining us in today's program. For the first presenter, we already have Ray Minhares. Ray Minhares is the Heavy Duty Vehicles Program Director at ICCT. He managed a global team of researchers supporting the transition to a soot-free, low-carbon, and zero-emission commercial truck and bus fleet across major vehicle markets. He holds a master's degree in public health from the University of California, Berkeley, and also a bachelor's degree in international development, environmental studies, and philosophy from the University of California, Los Angeles. And today, he will bring a global and market trends in e-mobility. So good. Hello, Ray Minhares. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sounds clear. And then we would like to remind you, Ray, that we have about 10 minutes for you to deliver your presentation. Is that okay?
That's okay. And it looks like you have my slides. So in that case, I will just tell you when to move to the next slide.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ray Minhares.
Thank you very much. And thank you to my ITDB colleagues and to the World Bank and to our partners in the Indonesian government Hello and good morning to you all. Next slide, please. Today I'm here to present to you on global and market trends in electric mobility. I'm going to focus on the broad perspective. I'm not just going to focus on mass transit. In Indonesia today, we already see many examples of electric mobility. This is something to be very proud of. This is not an easy transition. It's clear that the Indonesian government has brought significant support and energy to invest in an electric economy. And that is going to deliver significant benefits, both from a public health perspective and from an environmental perspective. Next slide, please. Here at the ICCT, we have a vision to decarbonize the transportation sector globally by 2050. When we look at what are the main sources of the carbon dioxide emissions within the transportation sector, it's clear that we have light duty vehicles consisting of four-wheeled passenger cars, and that is the major and largest source, followed by heavy duty vehicles, those vehicles that move goods primarily. We also tend to include two and three wheelers in the passenger vehicle side and buses in the heavy duty vehicle side. But the point is that about 3/4 of the global greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector are coming from these on-road emission sources. And the growth in carbon dioxide emissions is expected to be significant between now and 2055 or 2050, I should say, from 12,000 megatons per year to 21,000 in 2050. If we are serious about addressing the climate crisis, there needs to be zero carbon dioxide emissions in 2050, or as close to zero as we can get. Next slide, please. And the solution to that has to include electric mobility. There's no way we can solve this challenge without electric mobility. Thankfully, due to serious investments that have happened from governments in some of the largest vehicle markets, as well as the private sector, the trend in price for the most important component of an electric vehicle, which is its battery, that trend has been declining over the last several years. In the most recent estimate, which comes from the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, the cost of a full battery pack, a lithium ion battery pack, is approximately $137 per kilowatt, which is a significant reduction from $668 per kilowatt in 2013. That's an 89% reduction over that time period. And the projections tell us that that decline will continue to the point where by around the year 2023, just in 2 years' time really, that the price will be $100 or less per kilowatt. That is a key milestone for us to be able to electrify vehicles without subsidies in the most important vehicle markets. Next slide, please. Now, one thing that's unique from the global perspective when we look at Indonesia is the important role that electric two-wheelers will play. Now, we have done an analysis for India. These are estimates specifically for India, showing that the price of a conventional two-wheeler is expected to continue to rise over the coming years. But in contrast, the cost of the battery electric versions of that two-wheeler will decline, primarily because we see the declining cost of producing batteries. And so as soon as 2022, we expect in India, a battery electric scooter with a 75 kilowatt hour battery may be equal from a total cost of ownership perspective to a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle. And obviously, the larger the battery, the longer it'll take to reach that price parity. But this is a key milestone that is in the near term. There's no real waiting at this point. We can expect the uptake of electric two-wheelers to be significant with these milestones having been reached. Next slide, please. And the trend is also encouraging when we look at other motor vehicles. So from the global perspective, the number of four-wheelers that are electric has been increasing year by year, where in the most recent year, 2019, we have nearly 2.5 million electric four-wheelers on the road today. You can see how that is dominated by China in particular. And that has to do with a very strong and early investment the Chinese government has made in the production of electric vehicles. But close behind is the European market and the United States. So these three markets, China, Europe, and the United States today, dominate the sale of electric four-wheelers. Next slide, please. And what's interesting about these markets is how important city-specific actions are. And I know in the context of our ITDP and World Bank partnership, we're focusing on Greater Medan and Greater Bandung. I think the message here from the rest of the world is very clear, that cities have a lot of authority and power and interest in motivating the uptake of electric vehicles. So we see in the global context that just 25 cities around the world account for as much as 40% of all of the electric four-wheelers that have been sold. And so those cities, the most important of which can include, for example, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen in China, followed by Los Angeles in the United States. In Europe, we see cities like Oslo, for example, which is in Norway, a fairly small country by population, but a country that nevertheless has made a significant push for electric vehicles. Next slide, please. It's not only a trend in the passenger vehicle side. There's also a trend occurring on the heavy duty vehicle side. These are buses and trucks that are carrying commercial freight. Over the past several years, we've seen growth, significant growth in the sales of heavy duty vehicles. Those sales are dominated globally by buses. Buses are, in this context, the easiest heavy duty vehicle to electrify. They have a fixed route. Their schedules are predictable. Their charging points are well known. Their stopping points are well known. The duration of those stopping points is well known. We have a very strong ability to plan for the electrification of bus fleets. And for that reason, it makes so much sense for you, our colleagues in Indonesia, to focus in the bus sector. And another reason is because these buses can also make a significant contribution to outdoor air pollution if they're not using the best available emission control technologies, which we know is the case today in Indonesia. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Ray. I think we have 2 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. I've got 2 more slides. So this is just to zoom in a bit on the US context. So you can see the growth that we have in heavy duty vehicles in the United States, which has been dominated by buses. And again, this is because we're at the very beginning stages of the electrification of this heavy duty fleet in the United States. But still, in the most recent, say, 2 or 3 years, that growth has extended to other truck types. And so we have legacy manufacturers like Daimler, BYD not so legacy, but let's say more global traditional manufacturers in this context, but many more startup companies, and that's significant. Next slide, please. And finally, just to call attention to California, because I know one of our speakers today is from California. In the United States, California dominates the sales of heavy-duty electric vehicles. I think this story about California's policy framework is a very important one for us to share with our Indonesian colleagues. I think we have a lot to learn about what California is doing right, and I hope that we can do all we can as international partners to replicate that approach out internationally. Next slide. So I believe that's my last slide. Thank you very much for the opportunity and best of luck for the rest of the session. Back to you.
Hi, Achin.
Thanks, Rania. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for the introduction. And it is a great honor for California to be part of this important discussion on how we could provide the most efficient and cleanest transportation to our people. Let's go to slide number 2, please. Slide number 2 shows California's greenhouse gas emissions inventory. In California, around 40% of greenhouse gas emissions are from vehicles' tailpipe emissions. If we also include the upstream emissions from refineries, this number would go up to 50%. That means a half of California's greenhouse gas emissions are caused by transportation. So controlling tailpipe emissions and the reducing carbon intensity of our transportation fuels would really be crucial for California to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Slide number 3, please. Although most Californians still travel in conventional vehicles, we have started moving towards using zero-emission technologies to achieve our energy efficiency, clean air quality, and the climate protection goals. Today, there have been more than 860,000 zero-passenger vehicles sold in California since 1998. With our continued expansion on public fueling and the charging network, we believe we will achieve the 1 million vehicle milestone pretty soon. We also have very vigorous goals to transition our buses and the school buses to zero emission, as Ray just mentioned, so we can provide further benefits to our local communities. As of December 2020, there have been at least 1,200 zero-emission buses delivered or ordered by public transit agencies, airport shuttle operators, universities, and the private companies here in California. Also, another 500 zero-emission school buses were either deployed or ordered by school districts to transport our students. In our governor's latest budget proposal, he's also calling for another 1,000 zero-emission buses and 1,000 zero-emission school buses in the next 3 years. Now we're at slide number 4. You may still remember the pie chart from slide number 2, that 28% of our statewide greenhouse gas emissions are from passenger vehicles' tailpipe emissions. This is extremely important for us to understand that we need to move our travelers to public transit in order to curb those emissions. In the United States, traditionally, public transit often has a great focus on transit-dependent riders. However, when public transit could provide similar convenience and travel time, it could also attract everyone and not just the transit-dependent riders. This would really help resolve traffic congestion and the air quality issues. This is a part of the reason why California wants public transit to be the very first heavy-duty vehicle application to deploy zero-emission technologies. Let's go to slide number 5, please. With zero-emission buses, we can ensure that affordable zero-emission technologies are immediately available to everyone, including the low-income residents. This is very important for the social equity and also access to clean transportation for everyone. When public transit utilizes the most fuel-efficient technologies to transport mass population, the efficient benefit basically is also amplified. So while transit buses probably only account for 1% of California's heavy-duty vehicle population, the experience and the technologies could really be piggybacked by other heavy-duty vehicle applications and help them expedite their conversion to zero-emission technologies. In slide number 6, I would like to emphasize that switching from conventional buses to zero-emission buses is not easy, and also it has to overcome a lot of challenges, such as incremental cost, potential change of operation, and also technology reliability. While there are more than 300 transit agencies in California, with their bus numbers ranging from maybe just 2 buses per transit agency to 2,400 buses for each transit, we need to have a holistic approach to accommodate individual transit agencies' operation, while also allow technologies to continue their advancement. To do so, California is pairing incentive funding and statewide regulation to maximize the effectiveness. So the next 2 slides, slides number 7 and 8, will provide a brief overview of the innovative clean transit regulation that targets a complete fleet conversion by 2040. This regulation sets a purchase requirement starting with the large transit agencies and also the standard 40-footer buses in 2023. For the smaller transit agencies and the other types of buses, such as the double-deckers and the motor coaches, they will be phased in starting 2026. Starting 2029, all new bus purchases have to be zero emission. In California, buses are normally kept for 14 years, so the average annual replacement rate is around 7%. In addition to climate protection benefit, the emission reduction and the health benefit here also provide a lot of significance, because the transit buses, they're operated inside of our local communities. In slide number 8, I really want to...
Yeah, there is 5 minutes left to present this presentation. Thank you, Yechun.
Sure, yeah. In slide number 8, I want to introduce a very special concept required in the regulation. And this would actually talk about the planning concept. Let's maybe move to slide number 9 directly. About deploying zero-emission buses, it is really more than just procuring vehicles. It will require synchronization. The synchronization is between vehicle procurement, fuel infrastructure build-out, and also the long-term fuel cost management. It will take maybe like years of practice for us to master the entire operation. For vehicle procurement, we want to make sure that the zero-emission buses we're buying could really have the range, the climbing ability, and the dispatch pattern that would really meet our needs. In California, we have transit buses that would operate as little as 150 kilometers a day, but it also could be as much as 800 kilometers a day. We also have routes that would have several hundreds to 1,000 meters change in altitude. So selecting the suitable technology is really our very first step towards success. So with that, I really want to introduce you a few case studies here in California, starting slide number 10. This one is for Sunline Transit. Sunline Transit started operating the fuel cell technology in 2000, and they really have the longest operation history in the US. Today, it is operating its 9th generation fuel cell electric buses on commercialized platform. They also have established the very first heavy-duty zero-emission vehicle training center that could provide comprehensive training to support zero-emission buses deployment and management. Currently, they are also operating the largest on-site electrolysis hydrogen production for transportation in the United States. This novel operation is not just making Sunlight a hydrogen fuel supplier on a major corridor, but it will also demonstrate cost parity for the hydrogen fuel. In slide number 11, let's take a look at the Foothill Transit Agency. Foothill Transit is the very first transit in the United States utilizing on-road charging technology to operate its battery electric buses. This has been studied by National Renewable Energy Laboratory with the support from California Air Resources Board from 2014. This deployment is also the longest battery electric bus study in the world, with data publicly available. The significance is really in twofold. First, it proves that the fuel cost can be managed through careful charging behavior. And the second one is that the final results will really help us understand how much the total cost of ownership is for a commercialized battery electric buses. In addition, Foothill Transit is also going to put 2 battery electric double-deckers into its revenue service starting June this year. Although they're an early adopter for the battery electric technology, they continue to explore the most suitable technology for them. 20 fuel cell electric buses will be delivered next year, with a hydrogen station of 1,600 kilograms to be opened and launched at the same time. We look forward to seeing the performance of their new zero-emission buses. The third one case study is the AC Transit.
Sorry?
I'm sorry.
2 minutes left, Yachun. Thank you. You can go forward.
Yeah. The AC Transit has deployed 12 fuel cell electric buses in 2010. That is also the longest fuel cell electric demonstration in the world. The significance there is that it proved that the 1-to-1 replacement ratio, and it also proved that the durability for fuel cell stack to meet the ultimate lifetime set forth by Department of Transportation. Again, this very novel transit agency is still kind of deploying both technologies to identify the most suitable technology for its operation. So let's now move to the very last slide. Given the opportunity, public transit can and should be the top choice to transport all people. However, this is not going to be easily received due to decades of overuse of personal vehicles in California. But it is going to be very important to bring in our new generations of riders through education and a more efficient transit design. In the meantime, incentive funding continues to be essential to offset the higher cost in early years. Public transit has really reshaped the landscape of transportation. It will continue to lead us towards a clean, sustainable transportation future with everyone's support. I also want to echo Director General Satyadi's calling for more clean public transit to address global and local environmental issues. And this concludes my presentation. Back to you, Vania.
Thank you very much, Yachun. Such an interesting cases from California, and I agree with you that deploying e-buses, I think it's way beyond vehicle procurement. And then from the US, now we are heading to Latin America, specifically to Santiago, the capital city of Chile. And I'd like to introduce our next presenter. He is Sebastian Galarza as the Director of Transport and Energy, the Mario Molina Center of Santiago de Chile, and he will bring the topic about Santiago e-bus case study.
So I'll be presenting on the Santiago case study. Just a brief note on who we are. I represent Centro Mario Molina Chile. We're an independent research institution that has two areas of work, basically air quality and climate change, and energy and transportation, which is the area that I lead. And this brings us to what we're doing now, right? We've been focused on the decarbonization of the transportation sector in Latin America and the Caribbean for the past 18 years, and have recently worked actively in the promotion of electric drive and public transportation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the context of where I am or where we're working. This is Santiago de Chile. I hope that you can see the video. It's a city of over 7 million people. Currently, we have around 7,000 buses operating on over 400 routes with 11,000 stops. We move around 3.3 million passengers a year on the public transportation system. And as you can see in the city is surrounded by the Andes mountain range, which has captured the atmospheric contamination in the city. So since the 90s, when we saw a lot of growth, economic growth, that in turn, led to a large increase in the transportation fleets, we've seen this concentration of particulate matter and emissions in the city, which has spurred the country to move forward in formalizing the public transportation system that the city had. So it's gone through a lot of changes. But in 2007, this is the system that we currently have in place, right? So it started in 2007. Basically, it formalized the transportation system. It took around 6,000 buses off the road. Currently, we have around 6,900 buses. The system basically is one where we have a public transportation authority that contracts out the operation and the depots to private operators. So right now we have 7 private operators that are operating these buses for the Public Transportation Authority. And so in terms of technology, what the country has done really is use public transportation as a gateway to clean technologies. So as I mentioned, since the 90s, we've had these problems with air quality in the city. And the government has used public transportation to introduce cleaner technologies. So since 2012, basically, we have ultra low sulfur fuels. And in 2018, we were the first city in Latin America to adopt Euro 6 standards for all public fleet renewals. And this is a way to really spur change. And what we've seen happen over the last few years is this, right? So right now we have currently around 30% or a little bit more of the fleet, which is soot free. So Euro 6 or better. Around 11% of the fleet is electric, now composed of electric buses. And this is a long history of trial and error, right? So we've had a lot of electric bus pilots in the city, and we've had a lot of innovation and business models that have spurred this growth. So as I mentioned, since 2013, we started to test electric buses. These have a lot of different purposes and different typologies, but mostly it's what you're seeing right now on the screen. That's a 12-meter bus. We have interurban, also intercity buses, electric buses that we've tested. We've had, articulated also BRT system type buses tested as well. We've had, these smaller buses, which are 9-meter passenger buses, also tested in the city. And with the exception of the articulate buses, all of these have scaled, right? So one of the reasons that this technology has been able to scale is not only that we've been able to test the technology and the operational capacity of these buses, but we've also developed innovative business models to scale these operations. And this has happened with a lot of different players in the market, but I'm just going to give one example, which is an alliance between Metbus. Metbus is the public transportation operator, one of the 7 that I mentioned, NLX, which is the utility company for Santiago de Chile, and BYD, which is a electric bus manufacturer. And what was basically done between these 3 operators is a leasing approach to be able to introduce 100 buses into the public transportation fleet during a process where there was a contract extension given by the Public Transportation Authority. So the Public Transportation Authority, here described by MTT, extended a contract to Metbus. Metbus said, yes, I'll operate these buses, or they'll be electric. And to finance those electric buses, NLX came in and providing not only the financing for the buses, but also the infrastructure, bought through BYD, which BYD then signed a contract for the maintenance of these buses with Metbus, right? And what's happening here, it's the financial interaction of this arrangement with the public transportation system. AFT is the financial administration agency. Basically, they take care of they're the central fare collection and also the subsidy collector. The subsidy for the public transportation system is extensive for Santiago de Chile, but so it's important to note. And basically what the financial administration is doing is paying the fee to the utility company and discounting that from the payments to the private operator to be able to introduce these buses, scale these technologies, and innovate in the financial model that has proven to be very attractive, right? So we've seen that scale to the extent that currently we have close to 800 buses, electric buses in Santiago that have scaled through very similar arrangements. So something that we've also done to basically improve these approaches is also create testing tools to reduce asymmetries of information between all the players in the electric bus markets. Santiago, in that sense, has together, actually, the Ministry of Transportation, Centro Mario Molina, and other international actors developed a bus cycle, Trans-Santiago, a Santiago bus cycle, to measure energy consumption for all buses that are type approved to operate in the city of Santiago. So any player, any bus manufacturer, either diesel or electric, that wants to sell a bus in Santiago needs to perform and submit their energy consumption numbers under the Santiago cycle, which is representative of the driving conditions in the city, right? So it gives better transparency to the market. And it also creates a lot of, it has made it more dynamic, basically. And just to point out here, these are the buses that are currently type approved, the electric buses that are currently type approved for the Chilean markets. And as you can see, we have a lot of international players. We have BYD, Yutong, Fotong, Jontong, and Kinglong all have buses currently operating in the Santiago fleet. And as you can see, the energy consumption and range numbers, these are established through the Santiago cycle. So these vary a lot from what you're seeing a lot of the manufacturers state. And that's because of these testing tools that we developed to reduce these asymmetries of information, right? Another aspect which is crucial as well for scaling these operations is to really plan around infrastructure and these deployments. Currently, to operate close to 800 electric buses, we have 11 bus terminals with over 270 chargers and an installed capacity of 32 megawatts. So this is a large infrastructure investment and planning exercise. And one of the issues that we've also dealt with is this, right? The charging standard. We need to ensure also for the interoperability of the system that this is homogeneous and something that has actually been stated from now on. Basically in Santiago, all new electric buses that come into the market will need to meet this standard, the European Combo 2 standard. And just an example of the type of infrastructure that we're seeing deployed in the city, I have another video. This is actually, just to go back, this is El Conquistador. So currently it has it's operating 215 electric buses out of this terminal with 57 150 kilowatt chargers, right? And this has become basically one of the largest electric bus terminals for overnight charging in the world. I believe it is the largest outside of China. So, again, this is a lot of planning. There's a lot of details into what you're seeing that need to be, thought through, but really it's what makes these projects work, right? So there's a lot of work that has to be done on the margins to really make these projects bankable, and that's something that we've learned over time. And electric terminals are a key component, and the infrastructure is a key component of that scaling of these technologies, right? Another thing that we like to point out or we like to focus on as well is the development of fleet-wide electrification strategies to really plan for the deployment of these technologies and make sure that any goals that are set to electrify public transportation fleets can actually be met by the deployment of these technologies. So as I mentioned, We've currently moved very fast in terms of electrification in the past few years. From 2018 basically to 2020, we were able to introduce over 800 electric buses, close to 800 electric buses. And we are moving fast also in that regard in planning for what comes next. And I've seen some of the questions being deployed, and I think some of my colleagues are going to talk a little bit more about this. But one of the things, or one of the planning tools that we've developed that is not only common to us, but it's also common to some of the work that our colleagues are doing in ICCT, for example, is to develop, is to determine really the potential to electrify different types of routes within the public transportation network. So what we do is we identify all the transportation routes in the system. We basically compile information regarding, their GPS and their acceleration and other metrics that I can go into further detail if questions are asked. But basically, we developed a simulation model where we're able to run simulations of electric bus operations in the city and determine basically which routes should be prioritized for electrification, right? And that is what allows us to plan for electrification of the public transportation fleets and also to meet our goals. And one of the goals that has been set for Chile, for example, is to electrify all public transportation by 2040. And in the case of Santiago specifically, to meet that goal by 2035. So how are you going to meet that? How are you going to meet that goal to electrify all the public transportation fleet to 2035? Basically, we're scaling through competitive public tenders. And here, yes.
I think we still have 3 minutes left for this presentation. Thank you.
Perfect, Banya. That should be enough for me. So as I mentioned, right now we're scaling through competitive tenders. Actually, Santiago is in the process of renewing close to 80% of its current fleet. So what we're doing is actually we're opening the tender up to basically compete. Both diesel buses that have to meet the Euro 6 standard or electric buses will be open for the fleet renewal. And what we're doing is also changing the way that the public transportation system is structured to basically be able to, one, reduce some of the issues that we've had with the current system and also scale new technologies. So we're moving from a system that I mentioned earlier where you have a public transportation authority that contracts out a private bus operator that has a public, their own fleet and their own terminals with contracts for around 10 years and 1,000 buses each, which basically created a system that was too big to fail. And this is one of the issues that we're trying to correct with the new system, to this new business model where we have a public transportation agency that owns the bus terminals, so that the government will own the bus terminals, and it will have two different contracts, one for bus operators and one for fleet providers. So the fleet providers will be able to provide a fleet that is either electric or diesel. In the case of a diesel fleet, they will have a contract for 10 years. In the case of an electric fleet, they will have a contract for 14 years. And the bus rate operators will be able to choose a mix of what buses they want to operate, either electric or diesel, knowing that if they choose a diesel fleet, they will have a contract for 5 years, renewable to another 5. But if they choose an electric, they'll have a contract for another 7 years, renewable by another 7. And the business units of these public transportation, these private operators, is being reduced as well. And instead of having 1,000 buses per operator, we're looking to have on average around 400 buses per operator. So what does this new business model do? It separates investment from operation, which means that new type of money can enter the market. It facilitates operational continuity, particularly in the case where one operator fails to meet the standards that are set for the operator. It promotes competitive bidding. It improves the fleet standard. It promotes sustainable technologies by creating these drivers for electric mobility without the introduction of any subsidies. Chile does not have any subsidy scheme for electric mobility. So it's an interesting system to look at, right? And aside from that, there's other requirements that are included that I think are worthy to point out. One, for example, is that all electric energy supply contracts have to be met with renewable sources, and this needs to be certified. And that is also the case for all the buses that are currently operating in Santiago. So we can say that basically those buses are zero emissions. They do not have emissions coming from the source of the energy, nor are they emitting any emissions from their combustion of any fossil fuel because they are battery electric. There are also other drivers here for the integration of also different gender roles in the public transportation system that are important to note as well. So just in terms of conclusion, to wrap this up, you know, we've learned a lot in the past few years and we're still learning. To make e-bus projects work, you really have to work on the margins, and that's about technology. It's about making operations work. It's about structuring projects so that they're bankable and scalable. But ultimately, we know it's about moving people in a clean and a sustainable manner. And so just to point out some of the things that we've been able to distill, right? We need to innovate in terms of policy. We need to design policies that reduce technology, operation, and financial risks. We need to improve performance, the environmental performance of the bus fleets. We need to innovate also with business models to make these new technology introductions feasible and scalable. We also need to learn and develop tools to reduce asymmetries of information between all the stakeholders. And we need to focus on public transportation as a means to introduce electric mobility to our emerging economies, right? I think that there's a lot of benefits and positive externalities from focusing on public transportation. And that's also one of the main messages that you'll be hearing today. And also obviously enabling the enabling environment, a focus not only on the bus or the infrastructure, but also all the planning that needs to come about to be able to make this work. Thank you very much. My email is there. And if you have any questions, please, I'll be happy to answer them during our Q&A session. Thank you.
Please welcome Felipe Ramirez.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Okay, so I will tell you a bit about the Transmillennium system and how have we been dealing with hiring our electric fleet, which is a very special fleet since it's the very first fleet that has been acquired by a bidding process in Latin America and some other parts in the world, which make us feel very proud of the process that we have made here. And I will explain you how we did that. So we can go to the next slide, please. First of all, I would like you to introduce you to the Transmillennium system. What you are seeing there, it's the on the red lines are the BRT system. We have the largest BRT system in the world. It's 114 kilometers. And as you can see there as well in the yellow lines, we are expanding our system. Those lines, those yellow lines are being under construction right now. And we are looking for having them running in the next years in the city. You see there as well some purple lines, which are the cable cars that we are going to build. One of those is already built, the one in Ciudad Bolivar. Not sure if you can see it there, but it's in the south of the city. And then we have the green line, which is a green corridor we are right now structuring, and we hope to have it in the city very soon. It's a very special corridor, which will have also buses. And it's very important for us because it's kind of the most important corridor in the city. Then we have the blue lines, which is the urban system or the zonal system, which has around 17,000 kilometers, which connects and somehow fit the massive system, the BRT system that I have already shown you. Can go to the next slide. Then running this network that I have shown you, we have 2,357 BRT system articulated and B-articulated buses. Then we have 7,127 buses in the urban component. And then you can see there how many spots and stations we have in the system. Normally, before the pandemic starts, we were moving in the trunk lines 2,500,000 people daily. And in the zonal system, we were moving around 1,650,000 people daily. That sums up something around 4,100,000 people, which is actually half of what we have here in Bogota, which we are around 8 million people. The next city in Colombia has like 2 million or 3 million people. So just in the truncal system, we are moving the biggest country, the biggest city, sorry, that we have in Colombia. We have around 21,000 bus drivers, operators, and then we have the cable car that I was showing you in the south part of the city. Let's go to the next slide. I will focus on the urban component. Let's go to the next one, because there is where we are hiring our electric buses fleet. What you're seeing there, that those zones are the ones that we are focusing on, and where we are hiring these buses. All these buses run all around the city, but there is where the spots are and where we are having most of the service that we are hiring right now. Let's go to the next one. I am talking about the phase 5, which is the one that you see there on the screen. We have hired already 1,485 electric buses, which are contract for 15 years, for the next 15 years, since we have noticed for being able to have these buses running in the system, we were needing to have more than 10 years, what is usually what we have on other bidding processes. Why is that? Because of course, electric buses are more expensive than diesel or gas. And then we have had to make them competitive in the market in order to be able to bid for this process. That's why we have these biddings or these concessions for 15 years, and they have already started. What we have already running in the system is the first 483 electric buses, and then during this year and next year we will have the other amount of buses, which is 1,002 buses. Those that appears there, the 700, are gas buses that we have, and they are already also running in the system. We can go to the next slide, please. So here you have what you have is the implementation that we have in the city, how we are renewing our fleet. And what you're seeing there is that during the last year, just in the urban component, and during this year, we are having something around 3,000, 4,000 new buses. That's a very important amount of buses, of course, because it's changing the way people is moving in the city. And we are working on that because we had a very, very old fleet that we had to change, and that's what we are doing right now. Let's go to the next one, which is very important because it shows how the matrix in terms of technological evolution it's dealing. I'm not sure if it's not working. Oh no, okay. Sorry about that. I will just explain this one. We I'm sorry, because this one is supposed to show you how we are going on the 2022. But what it's important that there is that we have evolved to most of our fleet, having most of it, with a standard of technology of Euro 5 or above. Electric buses, when we finish having them, will be 17%, around 17% of all the system, which is a very important number right now for starting. And actually, it's the biggest fleet in Latin America and in the world outside China right now that has been hired. And actually, as I told you, that we have deal in a bidding process we have already done this by a bidding process, which is very important. Let's go to the next one. Sorry about that. So how we deal with this successful experience incorporating this electric fleet in the city. Let's go to the next. So first, I would say very similar to Santiago, we have done this in many other bidding processes already. We find out during the year 2016 that dividing fleet providers and fleet operator will have a very important impact on bidding these processes, because not just on having a better relation between operators and the owners of the fleet, but also having the financial system working in a better way in order to be able to have this financing process for the fleet. So we have divided this process: fleet provider in one side, fleet operator in other side. Then electric bus depots will be developed by Transmilenio, something very similar to Transantiago, but we have also defined some other options there with the bus depots, because it's a very difficult part and a very important one in terms of having the land that we need and developing it in time for having the fleet that is being built all around the world, and then having it here in Colombia. Actually, not all around the world, because this electric fleet has been hired for, it's a Chinese fleet actually, and we have been working with this fleet during these bidding processes.
Excuse me, Felipe.
Let's go to the next one.
There is 5 minutes left for your presentation. Thank you.
All right. So how to involve and create political commitment at the city level to promote the electrification of public transport. First of all, we have deal with so many key actors. We have done some union of wills within the public, private, society, and other actors that have allowed us to have these good results in terms of electric fleet. We have generated consultation spaces, political will, manage public policies, and generate regulatory framework and standards. It's very important that Transmilenio has been a pioneer in the implementation of new technologies, both in Colombia and in the region, and a catalyst for technological ascent for transport in the country. We have work in building trust. This is very important because technical knowledge in Transmilenio, it's a goodwill that we have explored and demonstrate that technology can help us to bring a better conscious in the city, not just in terms of operations, but also in terms of in environmental sustainability. And finally, we have aligned market conditions with goals, objectives, logistics, and requirements of the system at the city. It's very important because it's not just bringing the buses, but also making them to operate in the city in time for what we were needing. Let's go to the next slide. I will just skip this one just to tell you that we have been working on having more buses, not just the padrones or the articulated ones, but we are working on having B-articulated, and we want to try this year an hydrogen bus in the city. We want to keep going forward, and we want to be pioneers in terms of all these technologies, in terms of what is coming for future. We don't want to be just thinking that we have already done what we need to do, but we also want to think future. It's going to go very fast in terms of technology, so we want to keep going and be in front of what of our pioneers in Latin America and some other parts of the world. Let's go to the next slide, please. Let's go to the next one. So, in terms of public bidding, we have award in 2019, 794 new buses in 4 functional units. As I told you, 483 new buses. Andre. We have also have 100 electric technology in terms of with another 406 buses, and then during the beginning of this year another 401 buses, which make us having 1,485 buses right now. Let's go to the next one.
Excuse me,
Okay.
Felipe.
There is
Can
missing...
we go to the conclusion, please? Because we are running out of time. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'm missing just one slide that I wanted to show you, but I will just explain to you. We already have also 4 bus spots in the city. 4 bus 100 electric bus spots, sorry. And that's very important in terms of what we have done during this time in the city. That spots are making us to have all these 483 electric buses. That makes it's a very large investment, sorry, and it's creating more than 3,000 jobs in the city. It's very important to also mention annual reduction for these buses is 94,306 tons of CO2 gases that will also make us be better, not just in terms of particulate material, but also in terms of climate change, which is very important for us. I had some more slides, but I will probably finish here. Oh, sorry, here's the image of this electric spot. As I told you, we already have 4 in operation. This one is 133 electric buses. It has 45 to 65 chargers, and then we will have during the next year 10 electric bus garages or spots in the city in order to be able to hold these 1,485 electric buses in the city. I will just finish there, and then probably we'll be able to have some talks during the question time.
Now we are going to discuss all of the questions that have coming to us. Here we have selected several questions. The first questions, okay, I will read this. This is from Atsa, and this question is for Yachun Chow. So the question is, okay, how did the California Air Resources Board communicate the decision to adopt the more expensive e-buses as one of equitable solutions for achieving sustainable transportation, especially to those who are lower income taxpayers?
Right, yes, this is a very good question because we had to kind of go through a standardized rulemaking process. So we basically started the entire public outreach work back in 2014. And we conducted several public workshops. We formed a work group for work groups for with members coming from the industry, transit agencies, utilities, hydrogen fuel providers, everybody to have like a work group meetings several times. We also formed like a cost subgroup study and also other alternative subgroup studies. So basically, before we go to the board in December 2018, we had already totally maybe held maybe at least 12 or more public meetings to discuss issues, concerns, and also there's a lot of back and forth to really kind of find the sweet spot for the schedule, and also for the pace as to how fast we want to make the evolvement.
Okay, thank you, Yachun. And then the next question, it is for Ray Minhares, and this is from Yan Chao Lee. The question is, he said, thanks for sharing the global experience and great point on buses being a starting point to electrify HDVs. We know that the TCO or total cost of ownership of e-buses vary greatly from one context to another. And how to convince our clients that e-buses could be a valid choice for BRT while the TCO of e-buses in local cities is still higher than the diesel alternatives? Or should we not try to convince them at all when the TCO is too high? And what could be the ways to bring down the TCO quickly?
Well, a great question, and I wish I had an hour to explain all the ways you could reduce the TCO. So the first thing that we know is if you take one diesel bus and you compare that with an identical electric bus, same route, same conditions, everything is the same, that in almost all cases, and I actually haven't seen a case yet, in all the cases I've seen, the electric bus has a lower total cost of ownership. Now, in this case, I'm defining it as a battery electric bus because we can also consider fuel cell electric, which today, an equivalent fuel cell electric is actually more expensive than a battery electric. So it's important to make the distinction between fuel cell and battery electric. Today, battery electric is cheaper than fuel cell. However, there are other things to take into consideration, and not just that equivalent performance. And that is the operating conditions of the bus itself. And we have, you know, Felipe, I'm sure is expert in this stuff because he has to plan for it. And Sebastian has also been advising the Transport Authority in Santiago. From my perspective as a researcher, we know the longer the bus travels per day, the more kilometers it travels per day, the more you're utilizing that fixed cost, the lower the total cost of ownership of the bus. So the point is, drive the bus as far and as many hours per day as you can. I mean, that's true for any investment. You want to use that investment as much as you can. But the difference is that when we look at an electric bus, the purchase price is higher than a diesel bus. This is what we have to overcome. The way we overcome the higher purchase price is by using that vehicle more and more and more. So you see in the case of Santiago, they've designed contracts so that for electric buses, the contract period is longer than for diesel. That's to make the electric bus investment more attractive. The electric buses themselves have lower operating costs, lower servicing and maintenance costs. The benefit, the cost advantage is in operating the vehicle. So whatever the purchase cost is, the point is drive the vehicle as far and as long as you can, keep it in operation as long as you can. And that is one of perhaps the most important ways in which you can ensure that you're getting a better TCO than perhaps what you're evaluating today.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So is there any other speaker who want to add, maybe Sebastian, about this TCO?
Yeah, sure. Just to complement was what my colleague Ray was saying. I think, you know, the devil's in the details. This is the truth about electric bus deployment, because things aren't always as simple as you may want them to be. And so there's a lot of issues in terms of planning that are important. And in terms of a public transportation operation, for example, we have to deal with also fleet availability, right? The bus has to be ready to go when you want it to go. And that's when you start looking at the intricacies of electric bus transportation, you know, charging strategies. You're saying, okay, if I have to put this bus overnight to charge for 6 hours, that means that 6 hours I can't use that bus. And when I go in the morning to get that bus needs to have a full charge. If not, I'm going to have an issue with that bus during the day. So you have to start tweaking with the charging strategy. You need to understand those intricacies. But I think one of the things that's really attractive about the introduction of electric bus systems in Latin America that we're seeing is that with the introduction of this technology that's within, you know, a unit, a bus that's moving, there's also other things that are happening at the same time, and public transportation authorities are becoming smarter in terms of how they monitor the buses, how they monitor charging strategies. You're starting to learn a lot more about those efficiencies that in turn play an important role in the TCO to make the financials work. So, I think there's a lot of lessons in terms of electric bus operations of what has been happening already in Latin America that are useful for the Indonesian case for sure.
Okay, thank you, Sebastian. So next, we are moving on to the next question. It is from Gerald de Olivier. I believe this is for Felipe. The question is, what is the share of costs for the bus depot, fleet provision, and bus operations paid by fares versus government support? Okay.
All right. Thank you. I would just like to add something to the last question, just to tell you something that had happened during last days here in Bogota. I don't know, probably you have heard about the really difficult riots that we are dealing with during these days in Bogota. And actually, it has been actually a very strong proof for our electric buses, since some riots have been located actually quite close to these bus depots. And then what we have seen, as Sebastian was mentioning, we have to deal with logistics in terms of the 4 hours that we need in order to charge these buses. Since riots don't allow us to pass during a lot of hours, then during the next day we're having some issues in order to operate these buses. And that's something you also have to think when you are dealing or operating these buses, in terms of having them ready for operating, of course, and serving the people during the next days. And then I also agree with Ray. In order to have lower costs, you will need some more kilometers, but then you have also to deal with these kind of things that I'm mentioning, and then also have to deal with another issue that it's that these buses, you have to be sure the battery automatic, no, how do you say that?
Range.
The kilometers that they can run.
Range.
I'm not sure the word actually, but the kilometers that they can run, you have the opportunity to make them come back to the bus stop before you lost this charging time. Since this is the very first fleet we have in Latin America, in Santiago and Bogota, actually we're dealing with this kind of issues. And for sure, next fleet, we will have the opportunity to make them to come lower costs in terms of what Ray is mentioning, which is very important for making them competitive with other technologies. That's what we want in order to have much more fleet in our cities. So that's very important. And then I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the question was, but probably I will answer it saying 15% probably of cost will be the infrastructure probably, and then we have I don't know, the capex, the buses probably are another 50% or a bit more, and then we have 30% of operations in terms of what is the cost of operations in the of the buses. That's very important because Ray was mentioning that operations, it's quite cheaper than some other technologies, but the problem here is that the bus itself, it's quite expensive. It's still quite expensive. Since that, we are looking for some other technologies as the swapping batteries, which makes it quite cheaper as well. And we want as well to try this kind of technology. But then we also have the problem that swapping batteries have lower kilometers that we are also needing in terms of operating better our system. So it's quite difficult to balance this right now. That's probably what I also mentioned. It's very important. These cities like Santiago, like Bogota, like California in terms of, or Los Angeles or San Francisco, probably, that we being pioneer in this kind of technology is quite important for the world, not just for our region, but for the world, because this large amount of fleet that we are working with is showing how to deal with new technology. It's not easy in order to us, the decision makers, to bring this technology, to make that work in our city, because risk is quite high in terms of what could happen trying this new technology. But for the moment, I think it's been quite a good experience that we are having in Latin America, at least with this technology of electric buses.
Okay, thank you, Felipe. So just to make sure, so the biggest share for the deployment of e-buses is for infrastructure, right? So it's about like 50%.
No, infrastructure is not the most expensive part.
Okay.
Most expensive, it's related to the bus itself. Infrastructure, it's quite important, but it's not the most important part.
Okay, thank you. So we're now back to Sebastian. This is a question from Susmita Sahu. The question is, what is the duration of the operation contract of the private operator? How are the private operators paid?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in some of the slides that we're actually moving to a new business model, as I mentioned. So currently, the old business model, or currently what we have, because the tender is actually out right now, so people are bidding on what's happening now, so everything's very active. But the original contracts were for 10 years for the operator to run the terminals and to run the buses. Right now, we're moving to a different system, similar to Bogota, where you're separating operations from fleet ownership. And there we have a tweak. So if an operator wants to use the +1, so more than 50% of their fleet is electric, they get a contract for 7 years, which can be extended for another 7. If the operator chooses to have basically a diesel majority fleet, so 49% of their fleet is electric, or or basically the majority is diesel, then they get a contract for 5 years, renewable by another 5. On the other hand, for fleet providers, you have a 10-year contract if you're providing a diesel fleet, and a 14-year contract if you're providing an electric fleet. So that's basically the summary of how that works. And I believe the last question was regarding, how are they paid? So we have this financial authority that basically is a depository of all the subsidies that the system receives. I think there was a question there around the subsidies. So basically, Santiago subsidizes around 50% of all costs for the public transportation system, which last year were about $800 million. So you can get a sense of the scale. $800 million for close to 7,000 buses covers around half of the cost for the system. And so you have this financial administrator that basically collects all the fares, plus the subsidy, and then pays out the operators depending on passengers and kilometers traveled. It's a mix between both indicators.
Okay, thank you, Sebastian. So we still have some time for answering the questions. And here I read another question. This is for Raymond Harris. And this is a question from Gerald Oliver again. So hi Ray, thanks for the great presentation. The 2 to 3 wheelers market plays a major role across India, China, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So what are the takeaways in terms of incentives and transition measures to accelerate sustainable transition? So I think this is about 2 to 3 wheelers, yeah, but I think it's interesting to answer, Ray. What do you think?
Sure. Well, I think what I'll say applies not just to 2 and 3 wheelers, but really to every vehicle type. We at the ICCT have been identifying what are the 5 most important policy measures And I'm going to discuss this actually in the next the next session that we have in another day. But you know, we first need to see that the models are available. Okay, we cannot buy an electric two-wheeler if nobody's selling them. So we must have models available. One of the ways in which that can occur, California is an innovator in this case, for example, is to require the sale of electric two-wheelers. California requires the sale of electric buses. I'm sorry, the purchase of electric buses. They require the sale of electric trucks, the sale of electric cars. Please correct me, Yachun, if I'm missing anything or getting anything wrong. I hope I got it right. You're the expert
got it
here.
all right.
Okay, thank you. So you can require the sale of electric two-wheelers. That is not a crazy idea. You can also require the sale of electric trucks, the sale of electric cars, the sale of electric buses. This is one of the most powerful mechanisms that we have, that the government has, to bring electric vehicles to the market. This is how California has been so successful. This is how China is now driving the market. In fact, China models its own approach after California. So I would strongly encourage some consideration of a sales requirement if it's electric two-wheelers, if it's electric cars, electric buses, electric trucks. All of the above can work, okay? From a fiscal incentives perspective, because that is another key policy approach, we can have fiscal incentives to support the purchase of the vehicle. This is basically money that goes to, it can go to the consumer, or it can go to the manufacturer who provides a rebate on the purchase. So that is money that goes directly from the government to the purchaser, or indirectly. There are also incentives on the infrastructure installation. So for the utility to install electric charging, especially public charging systems, that is another key consideration. And then we have incentives that relate to the operation of the vehicle. So there are very good examples here. One of the most powerful incentives is the fuel price. We know in the case of Indonesia that diesel fuel is subsidized, and some of the subsidies on gasoline have been removed. If there is a subsidy on diesel, it is a disincentive for electricity use. So take that into consideration. You know, that could be balanced perhaps by changing the tariffs on the electricity rate and making them lower. But just as powerful is changing the subsidy system for diesel and gasoline fuels. And finally, I'll just mention, in addition to all of this, we have performance-based standards. And what do I mean by performance-based standards? I mean fuel economy standards, tailpipe emission standards, CO2 and greenhouse gas emission standards. So in the case of Indonesia, we still have not implemented Euro 4 emission standards for diesel. That means that a zero emission vehicle, which produces no health impact from the tailpipe, is competing against the diesel that is significantly more harmful to public health until those emission standards are changed. We also have, as I mentioned, fuel economy or greenhouse gas emission standards. These, by lowering the grams of CO2 per kilometer permitted from new vehicles, these will require manufacturers to bring more efficient vehicles to market, and that will ultimately lead to electric drive if the standard is strong enough. So these are just some ideas, some examples. There's a lot more detail behind all of these, but it's not just for 2- and 3-wheelers. It's really for every vehicle type. I think all of these approaches are relevant.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So those are applicable not only for 2-wheelers, but all types of vehicles. Next, the next question, it is very interesting. I think it's going for both Felipe and also Sebastian. The question is, what was the rationale in Santiago and Bogota for shift towards transit authority providing the depot facility? Felipe, you can start first.
Right. I would say there's no just one answer to that, because we have find out here in Bogota that we need to move in order to have all these the depots that we need. We need we we cannot just go for one way to having them. Actually, bus depots through history has been of the state here in Bogota. We are not moving to that kind of process. Actually, we are moving to have more different um, um, ways of having these depots. Actually, we some of our new depots are built and provided by privates and owned by them. But we also have this other scheme where we, as the state, have the depots. That's very important because we have to deal with two things. First of all, where they are built and what's going to happen during the next 10 or 15 years in these areas. It's a thing of land use. And then we also have to deal with what I think will be the answer for Sebastian, which is it's very important to have them, some of them at least, because you also have to be sure you are able to get them when you need them if something happens to the operator, and then use them for people and not just let the private, it's if something happened to the private, go with that very strategic infrastructure as the bus depots are. So I have to say there's no one answer, but it's very important to have at least some of them owned by the state, because you need this in order to be able to respond in if something happens in the city. And then when these concessions finish, you also have this infrastructure in order to have some other new concession. But that's very difficult because of what I have said. Cities grow. And then when they are growing, probably the place where you are having these depots are not no longer the places where you want them to be. So it's quite difficult. I would say, again, there's no just one answer.
Okay. How about
To
Sebastian?
complement, yeah, just to complement what Felipe was saying, I think he covered it very well. Public transportation contracts are tricky. If you look at the current history of public transportation tenders and contracts in the past few years in Latin America, you will see a lot of failure, a lot of contracts that have not been able to be executed, right? This is because of the intricacies of public transportation itself. In Santiago, one of the main barriers to be able to drive competition and bring new actors into the market was the terminals, the depots. Since they were owned by the private operators, it was very difficult to see a way of either removing that operator because they were inefficient, or replacing them with a new actor that wanted to come in and supply, a better product, so to speak, to the market. And one of the reasons why one of these tenders failed in Santiago was specifically that clause. An anti-competitiveness tribunal in Chile said that the inclusion or the exclusion of the terminals in the bid made the bid anti-competitive. So this is why we also started to move to this other approach. And then you have all the other issues that Felipe mentioned. So I think this is very important to understand, because this is one of the stumbling blocks when you're building up or when you're planning the deployment of large scale, electric mobility projects. The infrastructure, the location of the terminals, where they are, is key, and it's a very it's a sticky issue, something that really needs to be looked on.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Sebastian and Felipe. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, everyone. So after this, we are going to the next session. But for those who are already asked and we haven't yet to answer your question, we will answer your questions through email. Okay. Thank you very much, Ray, Yachun, Sebastian, and Felipe for such a fruitful discussion today. And now we are heading to the second session. Please welcome Heli Liao.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And, it's my great pleasure to here to present and tell everyone about, Shenzhen Bus Group and what's going on in the EV in China. And just to start everyone with a little bit introduction of who we are. So for those of you who are not familiar with us, Shenzhen is one of the biggest city in China, around 20 million population. And we are known as the technology hub, the Silicon Valley in China. And because we have companies like Tencent, BYD, which is one of our partners, and Huawei, which are very much on the news these days, etc. So I think these are very important as a backdrop and context of, who we are and what are the environment that we were operating as a public transport operator. So Shenzhen Bus Group is the oldest and the largest public transport operator in Shenzhen. And we run around 6,000 electric buses. Shenzhen is the first city in the world that are running on pure EV public transportation. In the city, in total, we have around 17,000 electric buses and around 22,000 electric taxis. And we operate around 6,000 of the electric taxis as well. And all of that electrification process was completed in 2017 and 2018, respectively, for our buses and taxis, which means that, it took us around 10 years. We started trialing the first batch of hybrid buses back in 2009. And we have already completed and retired our first cycle of EV buses, since their life cycle is typically 8 years under our contract in the last 2 years. And in the next year, we are going to be retiring an even larger batch of buses after completing a full cycle. So we not only operate the EVs, we also run school buses, tour buses, cross-border vehicles, travel services as well. So it's a huge company, around 30,000 staff. And we have around 110 depots around the city that are not only for our buses, and we also open them, particularly the taxi stations, to private vehicles, as there are more EV adoptions among private citizens in China, as we are pushing for carbon neutral in 2060 and carbon peak emission in 2030. Next slide, please. And I don't have to emphasis here on the benefit of EVs, but just look at the cost here, because we get asked this very often, particularly on the cost comparisons between like diesel and electric buses when we were running them. So an important differentiation is that starting from 2009, the Chinese central government started giving out a large amount of incentives, which composites around 50 to 60% of the EV purchasing prices for public transport operators like us. And they not only subsidize the operators, they also subsidize battery manufacturers, EV bus manufacturers like BYD, etc., and infrastructure companies. So companies like Windline that are in charge of building our charging depots, our charging piles, etc., they also get subsidies from both the central government in China and municipal government in Shenzhen. So because the municipal Shenzhen government of Shenzhen has been very, very progressive and proactive in particularly the EV front, we were able to do it at such a large scale, partially because of the financial incentives. So we receive both procurement subsidies and also operation subsidies. However, operation subsidies, we received them even when we were operating diesel buses as well. And because they believe that we have to keep our fare extremely cheap. So our fare is around 2 RMB per flat fee for every ride. And that is about 30 cents US dollars for any trip. And that has not changed in the last 30 years because we run on mostly subsidies on operations. However, our taxis, travel services, etc., all run. A lot of times we have to use the revenues from those services to supplement our bus operations as well, because the bus service is mostly seen as a public service one. Okay, slide please. Next slide. So a little bit about the journey of how we got there. So it took us 10 years, 2008, when the central government started having mandates on, the cities with conditions. We have warm weather here in Shenzhen, mostly tropical environment, and the roads are mostly flat. We don't have a very mountainous city comparing to Hong Kong, etc. And for us, because BYD is headquartered in Shenzhen, and it was very easy for us to trial the technology, because back in 10 years ago, technology was very, very unstable. So what we did was we completed different route bus trials, and then we gave feedbacks to the manufacturer. So both BYD and another manufacturer called Nanjing Golden Dragon. And I think we had the stats. We gave them around 500 technical feedbacks, and in return they adopted 95% of them. So it was a very much a working together relationships, because the manufacturers needed the operators to give them that. Okay. In terms of our maintenance staff right now is well equipped to train the manufacturers as well. And because I think one of the biggest issue that we have running on a large scale EV is the infrastructure and availability of the charging piles. So we in turn had to develop our internal technology with the grid style, which right now we use 4 charging piles per charging station, and then we charge majority of our buses at night because the electricity is much cheaper at night. It's around 1/5 of the price compared to during the day. And right now we are taking advantage of that, and also developing a energy storage infrastructure where we can charge majority of the buses and taxis at night, and then we put the extra energy into our storage system, and then we can charge the rest during the day as well, just to be more efficient in our operations. So our charger bus ratio is about 1:4, and our bus to maintenance staff ratio is also around 1:5. And this, I think we are constantly in the process of making it more efficient. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Haley. I think we still have 3 minutes left for your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. I'll wrap it up. Our most popular model is the K8. We get asked very often. It's a 39 seaters. And right now, because we see this challenge from all over the world, not just us, it's there's decreasing ridership in buses, and particularly in Shenzhen, with the metro really expanding in the next 5 years. back in 10 years ago, there was only one metro line in Shenzhen, and right now we have around 13 metro lines. So we are seeing more of the bus role as more of a supplementary role to as the trunk routes compared to what the metros are providing. So now we're procuring smaller buses for our batches, the KA models of 10 meters, even 7 to 8 meter buses. So we see that as the trend, and also to design more on-demand services, etc. Next slide, please. Next slide. I mean, these are more of the technical details. Since we don't really have time here now to go into it, I can share the slides later. And we use a combination of overnight charging, opportunity charging, and a midday top up, as I mentioned earlier. And we are constantly monitoring the SOC level throughout the day, which I think will in the future get us more prepared for autonomous vehicles testing. We're also testing more hydrogen buses, and hopefully we'll be rolling out the first line in the future as well. And yeah, I think this is a brief introduction, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Haley. It's interesting to know that it needs a huge, I mean, like the help from the government subsidy to make the cost of the trips still low, to keep the fare low. So thank you very much for your explanation. I hope we can discuss further in the Q&A session. Up next, there will be a presentation about e-bus case study in Kolkata, India, that will be delivered by Pawan Mulkutla as the Director of Electric Mobility Program under Sustainable Cities at World Resources Institute, India.
So talking about the electrification journey, so the presentation will focus on two aspects. One is to just give you an overall aspects, and then I'll jump into the case study of Kolkata and generally also highlight some of the challenges, because I think a lot of transit agencies would be interested to know actually what are the challenges that are happening in the procurement of electric buses. As you see in the slide, India launched its mission in 2013, and then under the FAME 1 and FAME 2, which is currently happening, the whole rollout of the electrification program actually really started. And it just not included electric buses, but also it includes two-wheelers, taxis, auto rickshaws. Following that, we also saw that many of the states actually started drafting their electric vehicle policies. And currently more than about 12 to 13 states have already approved their EV policies and are in the process of deploying and rolling out the electric mobility different modes in different parts of the country. And just touching upon the policies itself, it's quite interesting. Just as a key highlight, some of them talk about the percentage of the vehicles that need to be electrified. Some have focused, like states like Maharashtra have focused on investments, on job creation, and also setting up a target of how many electric vehicles. So different states have come up with different mechanisms highlighting based on investments, jobs, and vehicles. And if you look at the policies itself, it talks about three major aspects. One is, of course, demand generation, and it talks about fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. Then there is also options, subsidies, and mechanisms for charging infrastructure deployment. And finally, it also focuses on supply side, like land use, permissions, approvals, all that for industry to really roll out the e-mobility program. In the electric buses itself, in the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, under the FAME 1 scheme, 390 buses were allocated, 220 were procured. Subsidy was 60% of the e-bus cost, and there was no procurement model that was defined. The FAME 2, as you can see, is much bigger overlay. It is about to the tune of USD $1.38 billion. The bus allocation itself was about 5,000 600 buses. So far, 2,450 buses have been procured, and the subsidy component is about USD $275 per kilo, $76 per kilowatt hour, up to a maximum of USD $69,000. And the procurement model has been defined, which is the gross cost contract or the lease model. I will not get into the statistics, but the point that I want to highlight is that many states have moved ahead, and there are at 3 to 4 OEMs that are supplying the buses from Tata, BYD, Goldstone, and others. What we have noticed is actually 9-meter buses have been kind of deployed in majority in many of the states. And what is interesting is also that in most of the models, the electricity cost is being borne by the authority which is wanting to deploy the buses. And the bid rates vary very significantly. These bid rates are in INRs, and you can see that they are varying across different cities. Of course, this is subject to also the contracting conditions. Some also have moved to outright purchase in the FAME 1 process, and some buses have deployed this. And Kolkata's case study is actually from the FAME 1, where it actually did an outright purchase and deployed these buses, and the OEM is Tata. In FAME 2, these are the OEMs that have deployed buses, and you see PMI Photon is 750 buses, which are 9 meters. So you see the dark green is 9-meter buses and the light green is the 12-meter buses. And this gives kind of distribution. And that is what I was saying, that most of the buses have been the 9-meter buses that have been deployed. And in terms of just giving you a snapshot of how FAME 1 and FAME 2 has been deployed across in India, this just gives an idea of how different states are actually procuring these buses. So in FAME allocation, in the FAME 2 allocation so far of 5485 buses, the total operational have been 1,031 buses. And in addition to the FAME allocation by the union government, these some of the states also have come up to support this mission. For example, in Pune, a city in Maharashtra, the Smart City Mission actually has helped in procuring additional buses as well. In Ahmedabad, the BRT system, actually the BRT SPV also was instrumental in procuring some of the buses. And in Gujarat, one of the states, they have also come up with viability gap funding option for electric buses, which is basically covering the difference in the cost. And they've come up on a per kilometer basis. Moving on to Kolkata. Kolkata is in the eastern part of India. This is the location. It is in the state of West Bengal. It has a city population is 4.5 million and the metropolitan is 14 million. And it has very different public transport systems ranging from suburban rail, metro, tram, buses, auto rickshaws, and ferries. It is one of the oldest tram services that are operational in India still. It has one of the highest access to public transport system. As you can also see, this is the modal share distribution by different modes, and buses actually form a very key component, accounting for more than 60% of the total modal share in the city. In addition, of course, this is just a statistics. There are 11,000 buses and government owned are about 1,500 buses. One of the key drivers for the electric bus deployment also is that it has one of the highest NOx emissions and particulate PM compared to other metropolitans in India, and 4.6 tons per day are from road transport. And as you can see from the graph here, that 33% of the emissions are from buses, and hence electrification of buses is very critical for cities' air quality. In the FAME 1 scheme, 80 buses were funded by government of India. There was also a grant from ESMAP, and World Bank supported for 250,000 for the city. And you can see that the state also actually pitched in with 40% of the funding share. What has the state done so far? The electric policy has been launched in 2020. And I also want to stress that unless there is this kind of a commitment at the state level, the deployment just at city level becomes difficult given the governance structure in India. It was also targeted to be among the top 3 states in electric mobility by 2022. Of course, with the pandemic, it's going to get revised. And then there is a strategy or target in place for a complete shift by 2030 for electrification of the entire electric bus fleets. And they've also set a target of 100,000 public and semi-public charging stations by 2040. These are some of the buses that have been deployed, and this is at the airport in Kolkata. The total number of buses are 80. The distribution is there are 10 depots, and there's been one fast charger and 6 slow chargers almost at all the depots. So that is the kind of mechanism they have used, although it is very high when you see in terms of the total number of buses provided versus the total number of chargers deployed. This is also because the city has actually used a distribution mechanism in terms of keeping the long-term vision in the mind. They have deployed at 10 depots actually. So it's not just at 1 or 2 depots that we see the support for charging infrastructure. So there are 10 depots, and at each depot there is one fast charger and 6 slow chargers, and therefore you see there is high need of charger, 5% electrified fleet, and 12 routes with 20-kilometer average distance. So these are some of the specifications which we are just wanted to share, that the battery packs for 9-meter buses is 125 kilowatt hour versus for 12-meter buses it is 188. The driving range are respectively 130 and 160. And in terms of capital cost, this is close to $100,000, and this is close to 110, 120 USD. After the subsidy. So the purchase model is, as already discussed, is outright purchase. Tata Motors battery packs are from Australian Power Systems in USA. DC chargers are Taylor's Power from China, and electricity infrastructure is by the CESC Limited, which is the utility company there. And reliability, what has been the impact so far? The reliability of electric bus operation has improved to 98%. It has, of course, helped in reducing emissions. It has also led to lowering of operating costs and increased customer satisfaction. I just wanted to take some time to spend key challenges, which is not just relevant to Kolkata, but I think most of the Indian cities that we at WRI have been studying, that uh, some of the things that we have understood has been actually challenges related to procurement and the way contracting has been done. So I'll just highlight some of them. One of them is the need. It's a challenge as well as it's a learning for all of us, that there is a need for formulating a fair and balanced tender documents. Without specification of routes and depots, which typically the transit agencies are not used to in case of ICE buses or diesel buses, this has become very critical, and this information then becomes even more relevant when you are actually basing your assumptions on per kilometer cost. In some cases, we have noticed that a lack of this information has led to higher margins to be accounted by the operators and the consortium. So this has become a contention point for many of the transit agencies, that why the tender rates are different in different cities, because of availability of this information from routes to be deployed, the exact depots where the charging infrastructure will come upon, and the dead kilometers. The other point I wanted to highlight as a challenge also has been the ownership of the project. The way it has been seen is that the transit agency, we all know, is going to be the beneficiary of the assets, but the whole ownership of the project lies with the operator and the OEM. And as such, what needs to happen is this should be seen as a partnership for a city rather than seeing that, we are a transport authority and we are just availing services. As long as that mindset doesn't change, it will be very difficult to scale up. So this also, the contracting mechanism should be treated as a partnership, which benefits not just the authority, but not just the operators, but the authorities also. What we have seen is, in many cases, that there have been delays in achieving financial closure because of this mechanism. So I think ownership of the project has to be seen in a different view altogether. A couple of 2-3 issues that I also wanted to highlight is the FAME scheme also.
Bhavan, your voice is not clear. Can you speak into the mic, please?
Is it better now?
That's better, much better.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So also, couple of things that we have also noticed is that the bank guarantees have actually been a challenge, because for 5 years the scheme mandates that there needs to be bank guarantees, and there has been reluctance from the banks to issue guarantees because of operators coming in as well and not having their credit worthiness, and the duration of guarantees also have been a bone of contention. One interesting point we also noticed is subsidies received by the manufacturer, whereas the burden of providing the subsidy guarantees in many cases has been on the operator. So this has really led to a lot of delays because the consortium is coming as a combination of manufacturers and operators, and this is becoming a very critical point while deploying electric buses. Also, the residual values of e-buses has been unknown, and this also has led to higher guarantees requirements. And this is something that needs to be addressed in FAME 3. Also, one interesting thing that we also understood talking to the manufacturers is they are in the business of manufacturing and not in running the operations. But given the way the procurement has been structured, the OEMs are actually, this is not their line of business, and they are kind of being forced to partner and get into operations also, where they are almost interested only in outright sale and not getting into 10-year or 15-year contracts with transit agencies. And also, one other point that we did find out is that operators and lenders find that they do not have any control over the escrow account at all. It is with the authorities, and the challenge has been that when you're putting all this, when you're taking all this risk, there needs to be some mechanism also about the escrow account. Otherwise it becomes that I take all the risk, but the benefit, but I'm at the mercy of authorities in terms of the payments and collections. So I think these have been very key challenges that we have been a kind of understanding, not just in Kolkata, but different cities, on how the electric bus deployment actually has been, that there have been certain challenges. So this is one challenge. Also, another challenge that we understood is that every city and every state is actually being asked to procure their buses, right? And the FAME subsidy is limited. And we all know that public transport operators actually provide service to the city, and they don't have funding, and they're dependent upon state and central fundings. So one of the mechanisms that is being discussed is also, can there be a central procurement authority, just like how the Solar Alliance in India has been, that it really does it on behalf of states also, and that way it has been able to de-risk the whole procurement process, and removing, and that's why you see that this whole contracting issue is coming up from transit authorities, because they want to move this risk all to operators. The one other way we are only suggesting is, can there be a central authority? The terms and conditions still will be with the states, with the cities which are deploying, because every city will have its own requirements which will be different. But how do we ensure that the de-risking of the assets or the operations are kind of taken care? In nutshell, I think also to celebrate the success, that what has really worked, of course there's scope for improvement, is that it's a combination of three things, right? One is that you need a national scheme to really initiate and push the momentum of electric bus transition across in different cities. But also it is important that you actually have a very supportive local authority like state governments and municipal corporations that are very key to implement electric buses. I think that involvement also really helps. Then it becomes a team play, and having a long-term vision and strategy for full transition is essential for accelerating the deployment. In addition, I think, of course, the technical assistance with organizations like ICCT, ITDP, World Bank, all that also goes in a long way in building capacity into the systems. In terms of quickly, just last two slides, in addition to electric buses, of course, the city is also moving ahead with electrifying old taxis, and it is also with e-rickshaws. So they are also engaging, and they have come up with a subsidy to really replace the old taxis in the city. And this is, I think, a good initiative to look at the entire ecosystem and not just one mode of transports. You can see these are all the stakeholders that have been involved in Kolkata in making this happen, from the central government Niti Aayog, which is the think tank of Government of India, the West Bengal Transport Corporation, World Bank, and you have seen private players also, big IT companies and OEMs who have been part of these conversations to make this happen in Kolkata. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pawan, for the presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, you still can ask your question through the chat box on Zoom app. And now we are going to have a discussion session on the implementation of e-buses in Asia. And then, but unfortunately, here Haley cannot join us on the discussion since she has to attend another meeting. So let's go forward with Pawan. Let's go to the first question. Actually, this is about the life cycle of the battery, and then, as you mentioned before, that we still cannot predict the residual value of the bus, right? But I believe that there is still valuable asset that is left from the bus, that is the battery itself. How do you think about that? What are you planning to do with the battery? And is there any prediction for the value of the battery itself after it's finished the lifetime? I think. How do you think about that?
See, I think what we have heard is that the battery the residual value can be anywhere between 20 to 30%. And I think BNEF report also talks about it. And what we have also understood is that many companies are also devising the second life of battery. I think once we establish what is the useful life of the battery after the automotive usage, I think that will then help. There are mechanisms in company, and companies like Bosch, UL are developing this. I think it also has to come from the Department of Science and Technology, which is the nodal agency for standards in India, that there is a mechanism for estimating the second life of battery. Once that is there, I think it is still there is some, and we also will have data points, right, as we are collecting with cities. Not that the buses have been operational for 10 years, that's a long way, but I think some mechanism that has to be devised based on global experiences and also understanding from the lab conditions the life of battery. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And the next question is from Nupur Gupta. She is asking, what is the contract duration being considered in Indian cities? And what were the main factors responsible for higher response and lower bids in case of EPA's GCC procurements?
So first question, I think the some of them have tried with 10 years and then 12 years also, because I've been seeing now that some of the contracts are also looking at 12 years, but 10 to 12 years has been the major option that many of the cities have been opting for. What were the main factors responsible for higher response and lower bids? I'll just give you a very interesting example of even Bengaluru, because Kolkata was outright purchase and Bengaluru is where I'm also based out of. That they had to bid almost 7 times times. Of course, a 12-meter and 9-meter were separate cases, and for the 12-meter buses, the bidding is going on for the fourth time, and I think now they have awarded the contract. What we have understood is also that given the assured kilometers, I think that has been very tricky, and how the assured kilometers has been very critical in deciding the bidding rates also. The higher the assured kilometers, then you see that the cost per kilometer has been coming down. And when you start hitting like 230 kilometers, 220, 200 plus, I think the bids prices have gone down also. I think other factors also, the better the clarity in terms of providing support infrastructure, like the depot location where the charging would be defined, where the routes are, the more the information that is available for bidders, it has really helped in lowering cost as well. And of course, states also have stepped in to say that we'll give additional subsidies. So the 3-4 criteria have been around this, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And then there's a lot of question coming now. The next is from Francisco. It is about the FAME incentive. Yeah, how is the FAME incentive decides GCC or outright purchase? Is GCC covering only operational costs or combines the CapEx and also OpEx? What's better in your experience?
Yeah. So I would say that the FAME 1 didn't have any model. It was fine, which I showed in my presentation. It was both outright purchase. Some cities opted for, and some cities went for GCC. But FAME 2 GCC has been mandated. It is only on CapEx. And it's very difficult to say which one is better. It depends upon who is the authority. Who is it you're talking about? If you're looking from a perspective of transit authority, then of course GCC will be good. But we also see that given that most of the transport authorities in India have been used to buying buses outright with outright purchase, they find there have been some resistance to move to GCC also. And there's also a new technology transition. For example, many of the southern states, if you see in India, are not too gung-ho about moving to GCC because they were also have bodybuilders. We have to understand many of the transit agencies at one time were also doing bodybuilding for buses. So given the legacy, it depends on which one, but I think GCC, if we have been able to do a good contracting model, is kind of the way forward also, because we need investments, and I think transit agencies upright cannot really fund all the programs. So GCC would be better option.
So depends, right? Okay, the next question is from Pak Firdaus. His question is, does outright purchase price of e-bus include performance guarantee, such as range, battery degradation, and etc., and also product warranties by the OEMs?
Yeah, so it includes all the guarantee. There is warranty of the battery also, and of course it comes with guarantees. I mean, these are all very standard OEMs and manufacturers, so they know it comes with, they do come up with that. I haven't seen much information on battery degradation being talked by manufacturers very openly, so that always remains a challenge, and it becomes even more challenging when it's a GCC contract. But someone can even question that in GCC, the only thing that the transit authority should be worried about is the service. And why should they really worry about the guarantees? Because the guarantee is on the per kilometer cost, right? So it changes when the contract is GCC, but in outright purchase, the degradation, I think that's where capacity also needs to be built with transit authorities, that they can actually understand the whole battery degradation process as well.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is from Etsa. This is the question. Learning from the FAME 1 and FAME 2, which measures would you recommend and not recommend to replicate in designing e-bus incentives in Indonesia?
I missed this in between. What would you...
Okay, I will repeat. Learning from FAME 1 and FAME 2, which measures would you recommend and not recommend to replicate in designing the e-bus incentives here in Indonesia?
I think one thing we all need to definitely, we all know that subsidy needs to be provided. I don't think there is any alternative for a subsidy not being provided to transport authorities. And also, I think some of the states have gone. So while the central government or the union government has gone and given subsidy on capex, I strongly believe that the local government should also include subsidy on operations. Just to expect the local transport authority to shoulder that burden would be very difficult in the first few years. And one major thing I would really say that, if, and this is also something for Nupur from World Bank, that, something around contracting, I think we all need to really look at the procurement process and understand it better in terms of what has really worked. There are a lot of nitty-gritties that have been identified, which I also briefly mentioned about bank guarantees, about the escrow account setting up, about the role of partnerships. I think these are some of the practices that we need to do. I think the way the contracting is being designed and the way the procurement is happening, I think those will be very critical in achieving financial closures and rolling of the buses, electric buses. Yeah.
Okay, so the subsidy is important and also understanding the procurement process. Okay, there's still another question for you, Pawan, and this is from Nupur Gupta. The question is, what are the models for provision of charging infrastructure? Who is responsible for what?
So the way it has been designed so far is that the transport authority will provide two things in most of the city is the, of course, the electricity connection, and also the tariff rates are kind of lower for the electric buses. Both are happening. What is also happening in many cities is also we know that the who will actually deploy the, when you're talking about charging infrastructure, it is not just the EVSC we are talking about, right? We are also talking about the local transformer that would be needed, and high voltage to low voltage transmission wires, and if they are at a distance, the per kilometer cost could be very high. I think that so far what we have been understanding is that that is being done by the local governments. So they are kind of providing those provisions, and they're also bearing the cost of the electricity, and also the utility companies are giving subsidized rates for the electricity. So this has been the model that has been deployed. And of course, the charging infrastructure provider itself are partners with OEMs. Sometimes OEMs have seen bring their own charging infrastructure provider, or they've also been in partnerships. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's the last question of this discussion session. Thank you very much, Pawan, for your presentation and your answer. And I think for those questions who are not yet to be answered by our speakers, again, we will answer your question through email. So just wait for it. Thank you very much, Pawan. And that was our discussion for today about e-mobility and mass transit global case studies. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Mrs. Nupur Gupta as the Senior Urban Transport Specialist at the World Bank to give a closing remark to conclude our discussion today. Mrs. Gupta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vanya. So now we are at the end of our first session for this first workshop that we kick-started for the e-mobility study that we are taking on for mass transit systems in the Indonesian cities. It's really been quite a informative and exciting day. We started with very positive and encouraging remarks from Pa Budi about the seriousness of the government of Indonesia's commitment to electric mobility and how they were already progressing on that agenda. And they were committed to moving forward and were looking forward to this study results in informing that strategy and program going forward. Followed by this, we had a very interesting presentation on the global trends and how greenhouse gas emissions are directly related to the transport sector. In Indonesia, as I understand it, almost 20 to 23% of the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from transport. And this is therefore a clear priority for Indonesian cities to focus on, which are already grappling with serious air quality issues, health issues, related health issues, etc. We had a very rich set of presentations and engaging questions and discussions, very ably moderated by Vanya. I think we all learned a lot today. As I see it from the experiences, and these are all success stories in their own way. We learned from the US experience and specifically California, which is really has a head start in the US in showing the way on electric mobility. Followed by the Latin American cities of Santiago and Bogota, and then the big Asian countries of China and India, which are making big inroads into the e-mobility sphere and specifically in the bus sector, which we're interested in. I think the main takeaways were that a clear vision and policy framework really helps in pushing the agenda. We saw how it was the national governments in India and China that have kick-started that whole agenda by setting targets, putting a pot of money there. In California took a big lead, set clear climate commitments. So also in Santiago and Chile, where they had very clear climate commitments, and they are looking at 100% e-bus deployment by 2035. Similarly, for Bogota. So it's very clear that having a clear vision, policy, framework, and targets are the way that one will begin to see quick results and uptake. The second big factor were, of course, incentives. And these were both fiscal and non-fiscal. We saw how in California they have incentive funding and incentivize the uptake of not just buses, but other modes as well. So also in China and India, the other important aspects were, I think what we saw were the very innovative contracting and business models that have started emerging in the e-mobility space, how both Santiago and Bogota are now looking at very different contracting modalities of separating bus ownership from actual operations in the way that they have now started transitioning the depot infrastructure to owning it by the transit authority rather than the private operators to ensure much higher level of competition. The issues that we heard Pawan talk about in India on the contracting side and how they have transitioned from an open outright model and a contracted private sector model to just a gross cost contracting type modality. So we're seeing a lot of innovations, and that flexibility and innovation is really rich and warranted. The models that we're seeing in Latin America are obviously driven by the fact that the upfront capital costs are very high in the case of e-buses, but the OPEX is low. And that, came out very strongly from the Santiago presentation, was helped manage the risks much better as well, given the profile of the operators and how they wanted to make sure that there was better competition and also less financial risk for the operators going forward. So reducing the size of the contracts and looking at this modality. Charging infrastructure was something else where there have been innovations, where utility companies have started engaging and become important stakeholders. Although often we tend to look at this as a transport solution, it's really not a transport solution. We must always remember that this is a solution which is cross-cutting and involves a number of stakeholders, both on the utility and energy side as well as transport. And so those partnerships are extremely important, and they have helped hugely, as I saw from the Latin American models, Chinese models, and elsewhere. And finally, we cannot underestimate the value of pilots. Everyone said that pilots started and were continued and helped them really gain a lot of experience and understanding. And in doing that, they were able to improve their own approaches, reduce financial risks, improve the business models, and improve the final outcomes in the end. And I think that's a lesson we in Indonesia must take away from what we've learned from the experience of these other cities and countries around the world. So those were my takeaways. I hope you found the day interesting. Tomorrow we have another interesting day focusing on the policy and regulatory framework aspects. Same time, we look forward to your joining and having wonderful discussions tomorrow as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum and
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Nupur, for the wrap up. And we would like to remind you again, as Nupur has said before, that tomorrow we will still have another session. We will talk and focus more about policy globally and especially in Indonesia. And then we already at the end of our first day of the workshop. We would like to thank you and give our highest appreciation to all speakers, to Ray, Yachun, Sebastian, Felipe, Haley, and also Pawan for extremely fruitful and insightful discussion. And thank you so much for all participants who joined actively in the workshop. I'm Vania Fitrianti Herlambang. I'm looking forward to your participation tomorrow. See you.